couple of years ago, King County Prosecutor Dan Satterberg told me why he was decriminalizing almost all drugs. Well, not almost. All drugs. It was a de facto legalization of all drugs in King County as long as it was a personal possession amount or less. I think it has had disastrous consequences. There is now a bill in front of our state legislature that would do essentially the same thing statewide. The sponsor is Democratic Representative Lauren Davis, who joins us here on the Dori Monson Show. Representative, I appreciate you coming on and wanted to have this conversation with us.
Thanks so much for having me, Dori. I appreciate the conversation.
You bet. Okay, so tell me why because I look around King County, and it's a disaster right now. There are people sleeping in mud. There are homeless people everywhere. There's heroin and meth addiction that is rampant. Why in the world would we want to export this statewide?
Great question. And to be honest, Dori, I look around King County and I see the same thing you do. That is accurate. The amount of suffering to the people in active addiction and to the community is profound and significant. And candidly, that was the driving force for me running for the legislature. I think the headline that has caught people's eye about this bill is the decriminalization provisions, but that's really the last step in the bill. It's a significant one, but it's really the last phase. The bill is ostensibly about implementing evidence-based and science-based approaches for folks with substance use disorder, people living in active addiction. We have known for ages and eons what works. What works is actually proactively funding really robust outreach services to build those bridges of hope and connection, and then funding treatment and then recovery support services on the back end. But the truth is we've never done it. We've not funded it, and we've basically turned a blind eye to these people and the suffering of their own and the suffering of the community. And so the bill is really about building a comprehensive, proactive plan to reach people where they are now and to engage people in services and keep them in services and support them all the way. And only when we do that, unlike Oregon, which decriminalized immediately, our plan is about building the infrastructure. And then once you have an alternative, only then do you kind of flip the switch and decriminalize.
Okay, well, but here's the problem. King County said the same thing when they decriminalized. They said the exact same thing that you're saying. And by the way, I agree with everything you just said. I think that we should offer every single person who is addicted and who is homeless, we should offer them job training, addiction treatment, mental health treatment. I agree with all of those things. But to say we're going to decriminalize drugs, if you do that, you're going to have people from all around the country coming to the state that is the lowest barrier. And the reason we had our highest murder rate this century last year in King County is because drug addicts buy their drugs from drug dealers. And the dealing is controlled by gangs, and the gangs are fighting for turf, and they're killing each other. And they're just, and I agree with your main point. I just don't know why we would legalize drugs as an element of that.
Great question. So I do want to clarify, I have no intent to legalize drugs. It's really about removing criminal penalties and decriminalizing. So legalization is what we did with marijuana, where we have supply chains that are controlled and we're promoting.
Right. It's a de facto legalization. It's a de facto legalization. Nobody would be prosecuted for personal possession amount or less of heroin, meth, any drug. It's not a legalization, but it is.
Correct. And individuals who are engaged in any other crime, whether it's crimes against property or crimes against persons, would continue to be prosecuted. So all the property crime, of which there is a myriad, that would all still remain in the criminal code. It's really about, if I thought, to be clear, Dori, that what we were doing was working, that prosecuting individuals and giving them a felony possession charge was leading people into recovery, I'd be the last person trying to dismantle that system. But the truth of the matter, everything we know about substance use disorder is that it's a disease rooted in shame and hopelessness, and that the way you bring somebody out of that is not adding additional pain. It's actually giving them some spark of hope, some hand to hang on to. And so you're really talking about people that are people in possession of personal use amounts are people almost invariably who would meet the diagnostic criteria for substance use disorder. They have a brain disease, and the beauty of it is that it's a treatable one with the promise of recovery when resources are provided. So you're not talking about people that are committing violent, crimes, and those. It's not geared toward those folks. And frankly, the best way to reduce recidivism is to treat the root of the situation, right? To treat the root cause. These individuals of which you speak, half of my friends are in recovery and have former are formerly incarcerated and lived in these encampments and all of these things. But they are today, they're the best human beings that I know, barring none, without exception. They are living the most incredible lives of integrity. They are living lives of service, and their recovery demands that of them.
I think there are few things more important or noble in one's life than to get control from addiction. I know a lot about addiction. There was a lot of alcoholism in my family. I'm with you on everything you're saying, Lauren, except for, you look at the stats. I've got UW Medicine Newsroom in front of me. In 2017, there was on average about 30 fentanyl deaths per quarter. As of second quarter of 2020, we're up to 170. And we were talking about almost a six-fold increase in fentanyl deaths at a time when King County legalized or de facto legalized drugs because the dealers are coming in. They are getting people addicted to the most powerful drugs possible. And I agree with everything you say except the legalization part. And I know that's semantic difference on what your bill says. But why not do all the things you're talking about without decriminalizing drugs?
Sure. And the goal is to do all of those things first. But the truth of the matter is, let me break down what's currently happening to these individuals with possession charges. So in counties and cities that still do arrest, they get arrested. They do a very short stint in jail, generally speaking, because they're not violent and there was no even crime against property. It was just simple possession. So they're released and then they're given a court date, and then they frequently don't show up because they've been given no services, no access to services of any kind, and they're still in active addiction. So they miss their court date. Then there's a warrant issued for failure to appear, and the system just cycles. And at no point does this individual end up with any connection to services or treatment. What they do end up with is a felony conviction, which will make it very, very difficult to achieve sustained housing and employment, both of which are imperative if somebody's ever to achieve sustained recovery. And so it creates these barriers. So it's not a useful tool in prompting or compelling recovery in its current form anywhere really in our state.
Okay, and I hear you talk about your wonderful friends, and they all were able to get control of their lives without the benefit of your bill, and I think that we should still have the legal penalties against drugs as a tool, not as a hammer necessarily, but as a wedge to try. If we want to give people the option, you can go to jail for your heroin possession, or we will offer you treatment. You choose. I still think that the penalties, the legal penalties, could be a useful tool for us.
So I'll be clear. I don't actually take issue with what some folks, would call coercive treatment and coercive models for crimes against persons or property. So, models like drug court or some of the things that you're talking about. Drug court's a pretrial diversion program. We also have sentencing programs like the drug offender sentencing. I support all of those things. What I'm trying to build is a model at which we really have off-ramps from the criminal legal system and on-ramps to treatment and recovery at every single point along what's called the sequential intercept model, which is basically the entire criminal legal system mapped out. But what we're talking about here is really intercept zero. So it's people who have not committed a crime against persons or property. And everything we know about what drives addiction is people who their current existence is miserable and they use to numb pain. They use to numb pain from their past and pain from their present. And part of the diagnostic criteria for substance use disorder is continued use despite negative consequences. So if that's in the diagnosis, then it is illogical to suggest that additional negative consequences just for a possession charge, all that does is compound their feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness and erect barriers that make recovery seem even further from their grasp. And so for all the other crimes, let's create on-ramps into treatment.
I hate to interrupt you, but I really want an answer to one more question. We only have about 30 seconds left. Does it worry you that King County has done this, and not exactly what's outlined in your bill, but King County has done this, and in the last 2 years, we have record level of addiction, record level of homelessness, record level of overdose deaths, record numbers of murders in King County. Does that worry you that the one county that is doing kind of what you're suggesting is a disaster?
Those things are all fair, but King County hasn't done this at all. King County has not funded any sort of robust outreach services or any sort of robust recovery support services.
Yeah,
when we fund those three parts together, it works. They have not, and I would be happy to send you the data, but they've not funded anything of the like that this bill is proposing when it comes to actually doing comprehensive substance use disorder continuum of care. It's not been funded anywhere in our state. It works when we do it, and that's really what this Pathways to Recovery bill is about, actually getting us there.
Lauren, I love conversations like this. I always appreciate people who are willing to come on and spar with me on stuff like this, because I think hearing both sides is the best way to let everybody who's listening form their opinion on it.
I agree, and I would argue there really aren't two sides. I think everybody wants the same thing, and
I agree with you on that, too.
That we can find a way to get there.
Representative Lauren Davis, thank you very much for coming on with me today. I appreciate it.